Good morning. Welcome to the Marion County Board of Commissioners meeting. It is Wednesday, February 18th, 2015. We're in the Senator Hearing Room here in Courthouse Square in Salem, Oregon. We'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, it's nice to be back. I understand that you kept the home fires burning here while I was gone.
He tried to set records.
Very good. Real competitive.
My fellow commissioner held me back, though.
Very good. Well, the voice of experience and reason here. So we have no one signed up for public comment, and before we move the consent calendar, I think we have a motion to add an item to consent.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to move under action number 2 under the Health Department, consider approval of ordering appointing Tracy Ribicod to the Marion County Health Advisory Board to a term ending December 31st, 2018 to our consent calendar.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and the reason is because they thought she could be here today, but she's not able to be with us, so we're just going to move that item to consent. So those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. All right, so that is done. So now we will move to our consent calendar.
And Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to move the consent calendar, under which is, first off, is the Board of Commissioners OLCC applications. Recommend approval of the Chalet of Brooks Greater Privilege, Lossings LLC, Salem. Approve an order recommending renewal of Oregon Liquor Control Commission license renewals. Under Finance, approve a quitclaim deed to convey real property at 5635 Ridge Drive Northeast, and approval of a contract of sale for property at 6380 Brook Lake Road Northeast. Under Health, approve a medical profession services agreement for John Michael Scholler, PMHNP, for $240,000 to provide psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner services. Also under Health, approve a medical professional services agreement for Lori Linton Nelson, RN, MN, PMHNP, for $350,000 to provide psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner services. Also under Health, consider approval of appointing Tracy Ribicod to the Marion County Health Advisory Board for a term ending December 31st, 2018. Under Juvenile, approve amendment number 1 to the contract for services for Justice Benefits, Inc. to extend the term of the contract until January 31st, 2018. And under the Legal Department, to approve amendment number 3 to the lease agreement with Valley Office Building, LLC, in the amount of $42,236.58 for the law library.
I'll second, making note that we're also adding the item on the reappointment to Health Advisory Board that we just said. And one comment on the OLCC recommendations, we put them all in a group instead of doing a few at a time, and there was, I don't have the number here in front of me, 52 or 92 items. But just one comment from Brian Wallace. I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. I believe it's with the Sheriff's Department, but he says it attaches a complete list and not recommending any denials, and he thinks this is the first time that's happened, as if establishments have better complied with ordinance and OLCC regulations. So it sounds like things are working.
That's great. Yeah, and just to comment on that particular item, and thank you for pointing that out. We have had a process in Marion County for many, many years where we would receive the applications for renewal, and then we would weigh in on them. And if we had one or two that there were concerns, Sheriff's Office had, multiple visits out there, problems with violence or that type of thing, that they would let us know that, and then we'd send a letter in and say we would recommend denial. And we found out when we moved through the process, when they just basically said, well, thank you for your letter, but we're going to approve it anyway, that they want, that our deadline is now. So we have to do all of them in bulk at the beginning of the year, and then as they come forward to us throughout the year, I'm not sure how the process works there, but anyway, this gives us a greater opportunity to take a look and run checks on the calls from the sheriff's office in particular on these establishments. The other question that I had for Kathy sitting in the back is, do you know how Tracy pronounces her last name? Robichaud. Okay. It's a French name. I thought it might be Robichaud or something like that, but Robichaud. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve all of these items. Those in favor say aye.
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 And they are approved. So now we'll move to our action agenda. The first item under Board of Commissioners is to consider approval of the 2015 federal agenda. And we have Barb Young from the Board of Commissioners office, our Government Relations Manager, and with her is Joel Rubin and Julie Crockett from CFM Strategic Communications, Inc., that represent us in Washington, D.C. So this is an exciting opportunity to hear what's going on. Besides snow in the other part, I'm flying out tomorrow morning, so you need to tell me whether my plane is actually going to go or not. So that's the thing I'm most interested in. So welcome, thank you for coming, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Perfect. Well, I'll just kick it off briefly and get us going here. But for the record, Barb Young, Government Relations Manager for Marion County, and we do have before you today our 2015 federal agenda. On the agenda are various policy issues as well as grant funds that we'll be going after and applying for grants. And this is basically our work plan for the next year, and we'll line that out for you on the PowerPoint today. And this is our team from Washington, D.C., here to present it today, and so I'll turn it over to them and let them introduce themselves as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Barb, and thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to get outside of our frozen tundra, which is our nation's capital. Julie and I were sitting on the tarmac on Monday evening with the beginning of the blizzard that happened, and we had to get de-iced twice, and finally got approval to be one of the last planes to head out to balmy Pacific Northwest. So we appreciate the opportunity to enjoy this beautiful weather and obviously beautiful state. So we'll just get to it. So today we're going to be talking about some of your successes over the last few years, and specifically what happened last year. Talk about our comprehensive approach to lobbying and how we work with agencies in your congressional delegation. Talk about what's happening in DC in terms of what is the budget outlook for 2015, 2016, and how your federal agenda kind of fits into some of the challenges that we have in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to review your 2015 agenda and take a quick look forward at the congressional cycle. So some of our past successes, we've had a good deal of success working with the Congress and with agencies. This is a sampling of your earmark and grant successes since 2007. And if you look at some of these examples, you're looking at road projects, justice projects, a lot of the reentry initiative successes, Woodburn Interchange, which we drove under this morning coming out to Salem, and that project seems to be moving right along, and I think it's nearing completion, which is certainly a positive sign. And we worked on an Aurora Airport issue 2 years ago, where they were trying to close the airport at night, and that was one of the things we worked on with you and the congressional delegation and the FAA, and that'll come up again in a different project as well. But I guess the summary would be there's $11.5 million in grants since 2007, which is about $1.4 million per year in grants and earmarks. So for last year, the first project on here is kind of an example of why government is bad and why government is good all in the same time. So the FAA and Oregon Aviation at Aurora Airport had come to an agreement in 2012 that if the Oregon Aviation bought and constructed a control tower, that the FAA would staff it through the contract tower program. So everybody was moving forward, and then in 2013, a year later, the FAA said, we don't have the funding in our budget to staff the tower anymore, which was a shock and disappointment to everybody. There was a lot of businesses moving into the Aurora Airport to relocate there because of the added potential business. And you'd basically just have a new tower sitting there empty. I'd call it the the control tower to nowhere. It's kind of like the bridge to nowhere, where you'd have a tower but nobody manning the station. So Commissioner Brentano came to Washington last year. We met with the FAA and we wanted to, first of all, confirm with them that they made a promise and they weren't going to be able to live up to it. And they, hearing an answer is good. I'd rather hear no or yes. And they said, basically, no, we're not going to be able to staff it at current funding levels. So we took that information and Commissioner Brentano went to Senator Merkley's office first and said, they made a promise to us that they were going to staff this tower, and now they're reneging on that promise. Senator Merkley, a new member of the Appropriations Committee, said, we're going to take care of this, and we're going to fund the tower. We're going to make sure that there's going to be operators in there. And so through the appropriations cycle, he was not only able to bump up the amount of money for the contract tower program, but also put specific language in there that basically singled out Aurora Airport to make sure that this bumped up money would also go to that airport. So in December, there were some calls made by members of the commission to key members of the delegation that helped move the omnibus appropriations bill forward, which had this language in there, and that was a success. So it was kind of a bad story in terms of the government where they made a promise and they weren't going to live up to it, and then the federal legislative delegation came through and ultimately delivered. So a good news story at the end of the day, not the best way the government should work, but certainly a positive outcome. Senator Merkley was out at Aurora Airport yesterday or 2 days ago, I believe, looking at the tower and continuing his commitment to make sure that those contract tower funds would be delivered this year in FY15. So that was a good success story from 2014. Some of the others here I'll go over relatively quickly. What we're trying to do, and you'll see this in your federal agenda for 2015, is to make sure that the programs that you all support, these are programs that you're going to be going after grant funding for, and we want to make sure that those programs are funded for the next fiscal year. So for the reentry initiative, there was a number of programs that you all will be going after this year that we wanted to make sure were funded, and they all received slight bump ups in their allocations from FY 2014, which is a good thing because everything, all of the budget constraints back in Washington, D.C. make it hard to bump up anything these days. So it's nice to see that the Congress is recognizing that the Second Chance Act and reentry initiatives are a critical function of the federal government. And they're also recognizing that Marion County has been extremely successful in terms of addressing your recidivism and dealing with a lot of the comprehensive issues surrounding reentry. And Julie, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, just as Joel said, we were very pleased.
Could you pull the microphone right in front of you?
As Joel said, we were pleased to see that the delegation supported these funding levels because these are the programs that will be offering grants next year. And next week we'll be meeting with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration and the Bureau of Justice Assistance to talk about these programs and how we can be prepared for submitting a grant application.
And I believe there's 3 grants that have opened within the last couple of weeks that we've sent along to you all in terms of the reentry initiative. So we're working through those to see which ones we're going to apply for. So it's good timing to be meeting with these agency folks to see what they're looking for in terms of priorities. PILT funding was extended again for FY15. There was a slight increase there. Marion County gets a sliver of that funding, about $83,000 a year. In addition, there's a number of other programs that are important to the county, including CDBG, COPS, the Tiger Funds, the Brownfields. A lot of these programs we're going to be looking at in terms of the Canyon Distress Plan and trying to target some projects within these programs. So it's good to have healthy allocations for those programs. I put 2 of the successes in yellow because they actually haven't happened yet, but I did want to mention them briefly. The ONC Lands proposal, On the House side, supported by Congressman Walden, Schrader, and DeFazio, passed the House with bipartisan support. Senator Wyden's bill took a little bit of a different tack, passed out of committee, Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate, but it's stalled there. We are hoping, everybody's been frustrated about how long this process has been taking, but we're hoping that with the NACO meetings next week and all of the counties coming out again and saying enough is enough, it's time to act. In addition, I hope there's some hope that with the Republican Congress there'll be it'll be a little bit easier to move through a Republican-controlled Senate in terms of some of the concerns that Wyden was running into with his own caucus on some of the environmental aspects. So there's a little bit more reason to be hopeful that a Republican-controlled Senate could help the process move forward. But again, it's been a frustrating process, and we just need to keep the pressure on the Oregon delegation to act soon. Secure Rural Schools hasn't been extended yet. Congressman Walden received assurance from Speaker Boehner that the House would act and support another extension of Secure Rural Schools for 2015. That would mean another $2 million for Marion County. We expect, my timeline there of action in March might be a little optimistic. It might be March or April. And we're hoping that happens and should be getting through the House and Senate relatively easily. There's a lot of support for it. The questions are for how you're going to pay for it, but those discussions are happening at the highest levels, and the delegation is very supportive of that.
Joel, if I can interrupt there, just
Sure.
I might not have another chance. Another question with that is if the payments come when they come, and it's talk about literally being 6 months out, and in the meantime, southern counties are really struggling. So if some way could be to, I'm making this up, but to fund it ahead, borrow it, loan, whatever, but some way to get the money to counties sooner should be part of the question.
One of the options out there that's being discussed is for the 2015 funds to all be Title I funds, because the Title II and III, that's just a longer process. So if all of those funds were directed towards Title I, they could come out sooner. So that's one of the options that's being discussed right now.
Right.
And if I could add to that, Commissioner Tim Josie from Tillamook
Tillamook.
County sent a letter in that regard. I forwarded that on with some concerns actually in the legislation about how it's set up for the dollars to be released from the federal government. So we'll make
Okay.
sure that we share that with you.
Okay. Oh, just briefly, you all are well aware of this, but we're not just going into your members of Congress and saying that we need help. It's working with the federal agencies. It's working with committee staff to make sure that these broad programs are funded, and that opens the door for your specific project requests. Working with folks from nearly every agency back there in Washington, D.C. We also track and monitor, advocate for and against legislation that's on your federal agenda. We, every day, look through the grant announcements to make sure not only that we know what's being released on a daily basis, but work with the agencies to make sure we know ahead of time to start preparing for the grants, where you sometimes only have 30 days to turn around a grant application. But then we also do the advocacy through letters of support, but also follow up with phone calls from members of Congress to agencies to make sure that they're doing as much as they can to advocate for your priorities. And then obviously you're going to be coming out to Washington next week, so those visits, and then bringing members back to Marion County to make sure that they're visiting your projects on the ground and they can see firsthand some of the challenges that you all have. And so your 2015 agenda, there's a lot of similar items on here. The reentry initiative, obviously Marion County has been extremely successful in addressing recidivism, and we want to continue that comprehensive approach to dealing with some of the criminal justice issues. Like we mentioned before, there's 3 grants out on the street that we're going to be going after to seek approximately $500,000 to $800,000 in federal resources And at some point, these federal funds are going to lead to sustainability here at the local level where we won't need to go after federal resources on a consistent basis. Is there anything you wanted to add on?
Just to reiterate what Joel said, in 2013, you received a $600,000 co-occurring grant to focus on individuals with substance abuse and mental health disorders. And it's our understanding that that grant will be, the funding for the grant will be exhausted at the end of 2015, 2016. And so that grant was actually reopened a couple weeks ago, and we believe that Bridgeway is looking to reapply. So that will be, again, good timing for next week to meet with the Bureau of Justice Assistance to talk about that. And then also, there's some funding through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. We want to explore those opportunities as well.
And the next, the Canyon Distress Plan is something that we've been working on over the last year to 9 months, and really putting together and putting a lot of effort towards really looking at some of the concerns of the canyon, the economic development challenges they have in terms of infrastructure. But as you all know the story, the federal government there also promised $15 million back in 1996 when they took out 37,000 acres out of use and off the tax rolls. But when they took those wilderness areas off the rolls, they promised $15 million in economic development. You all know the story. A study was put together back in early 2000. Governor Kitzhaber at the time sent the official request to the federal government to fund that $15 million economic development study. And what we've been told is then 9/11 happened, and I think people shifted focus, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And folks in the canyon have been starting to say, where's that money? We need help. And you all made a promise, the federal government made a promise. So the county has really taken a lead role, and you had to update the study. That was part of the legislative language, is we needed to update the study and resubmit it to the federal government. The study's been updated. We're going to be meeting we were supposed to meet with the governor's office today, but that's been moved back to March, and let him present the study to their office and ask that they submit it back to the Department of Agriculture. So we have that avenue to pursue federal funding. But in addition, we have also been working with the USDA Rural Development Program, the Federal Economic Development Administration, the EPA Brownfields Initiative, the Department of Housing CDBG program, and we're going to be bringing everyone together in a economic distress roundtable on April 7th. And so the federal government is going to be there. We're working with the state to have the governor's office there, and the local governments are going to be there to present some of the challenges they have, the projects that the economic study bore out in terms of what they need to move the economy forward and diversify their economy. And we think that these are some short-term opportunities to see some of that $15 million through these federal agencies. And we also think with the governor's rural initiative, there'll be some state funding as well. So working together and leveraging both state, federal, and local funds, we can start really getting some momentum, some economic development resources to the Canyon region.
And to prepare for the workshop so that it's very productive and it's not just a presentation of these projects, we're working now to have conversations with these local federal agency staff members from USDA, EDA, and EPA. In fact, we are talking with the Economic Development Administration in just a few hours, and we've already had a conference call with USDA. So that's been really helpful to let them know what these targeted projects are so that they can kind of get in their mind, well, what programs do we have that can support these projects?
And obviously the congressional delegation is invited to attend and potentially host this conference as well, because it'll be important for them to show their support for the roundtable and for the study. I'm going to run through some of these. The mental health court service expansion, you received a grant, was it in 2011? I'll let you.
Sorry. In 2011, the county received a grant for $250,000 for planning and implementation for the mental health courts, and that program was actually, a grant was announced yesterday, and so we may be exploring that for maybe an expansion opportunity. So again, good timing for the trip next week. And that could potentially be a good opportunity.
The jail records management system, there's some interoperability challenges there. At the federal level, they've eliminated a lot of justice equipment programs, and that's one of the reasons why we have COPS technology funding lower on your policy initiatives. So we're going to be looking for ways to address the records management system. And we have the Salem River Crossing. Obviously, that's a huge project. This is kind of a strategic add-on to the agenda at this point in time. We're probably not going to be ready to make a request through the Tiger program this year, but we need to start talking about it with the congressional delegation and make sure that they understand the priority and the need for the local economy. And then on the policy side, we have the O&C lands bill. Some of these I'll brush through because we've talked about it a little bit. The Second Chance Act funding. Secure rural schools, one of the things that the county has led on there too is trying to get reimbursement for sheriff patrols on federal forest land. Ever since 2012, the Government Accountability Office came out with a report saying you can only use Title III SRS funds for search and rescue. And the county and all the counties in Oregon were using it for patrolling and some other uses as well. We think that that's short-sighted, not allowing counties to use the Title III funds for patrolling of federal forest lands. The patrolling is instrumental to reducing crime, to preventing crime, to making sure folks feel safe, to just having a presence in the forest land. And we really think that that's a function of the Secure Rural Schools bill. The county, like I said, is taking the lead. You all led an initiative to pass a resolution at the Oregon Association of Counties 2 weeks ago, and you're taking that resolution to NACO next week to adopt that as a nationwide resolution to ask the Congress to allow patrols to be an eligible expense. So I just want to applaud your leadership on this. A number of other counties are affected by it, but it just didn't seem like folks were stepping up, and the county really is taking the lead on this, so you should be proud of that. As I mentioned before, COPS technology, there aren't as many accounts as there used to be for police and sheriff's equipment, so we're looking to try to bump up and really recreate the COPS technology fund. Transportation reauthorization bill is another huge challenge for this Congress. The current reauthorization expires on May 31st. They need to either extend the current transportation bill or pass a new reauthorization bill. I think there's generally bipartisan support for passing a robust transportation infrastructure plan. The challenge continues to be with how you're going to pay for it. It seems like raising the gas tax is off the table back there. There's some ideas about doing repatriation of corporate profits, which in shorthand basically means there's $2 trillion in corporate profits sitting overseas, and they don't want to bring it back at the 35% current corporate tax rate. So you could either do a one-time 5% corporate tax rate, and the revenue from that would go towards transportation projects, or you could do a one-time tax on these overseas profits, which could also go towards the transportation trust fund. There's some complications with that. In short, most folks think that the transportation bill and comprehensive tax reform need to happen at the same time to pay for the transportation improvements that they want to have. And that's not going to be able to be accomplished by May, hopefully this year. And we need to keep the pressure on the Congress to say, stop extending, and we need to start addressing our transportation needs. Support for some of the programs that you all will be going after, like we mentioned before, COPS, CDBG, Tiger, and some of the other programs that you're going to be looking at in the Canyon. Repealing the inmate exception for federal health benefits. waste to energy being included as on the clean energy standard by EPA, opposing the proposed rule on waters of the U.S., where there's a lot of concern that the federal government is going to require permitting for small bodies of water, even as much as ditches on the side of the road, before you can do any work. And that's a great concern to a number of every county around the country. And then protecting municipal bonds. Every year, the president continues to put municipal bonds in his budget, either capping them or eliminating municipal bonds so that cities and counties couldn't use them, or the impact of the capping of the rate would reduce the value of the municipal bonds to cities and counties. And we think that's not, that's one of the tools that counties use on a regular basis to fund larger projects. So I don't know if there's any questions. There's a lot on here.
I actually thank you for the presentation. This is really good preparation for our trip back to DC, and it's triggered like 3 or 4 questions that I'm going to shoot to Barb after we get done with this. But one of the questions I'll ask here on the record on the municipal bonds, because I've been getting emails and seeing information coming out of NACO primarily on this. Are the bonds that we use in this category? John, can you maybe just tell us locally what it would have prohibited us from doing in Marion County if this were to take effect?
Well, the bonds we have, particularly for this building, go back to 2000 or before.
So are those considered in
Sure.
this category of bonds? Okay, that's what I thought, so we can.
But I don't think
bonds
this
for
would
building.
affect those.
Yeah, that wouldn't be retroactive. It would
Right.
be prospective.
But if it had
If
taken
we were
effect
to-
prior, we wouldn't have had,
Absolutely.
that's the
Yep.
piece.
If we were to use bonding again, then we would be affected by this cap. This is not a new issue. It's been an issue for years in Washington about the use of municipal bonds and trying to keep because they do affect the U.S. Treasury. And a lot of congressmen and presidents have tried to reduce the use of municipal bonds.
Question, if I may. Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Just for clarification, is that because they're federally tax-free and in many cases state tax-free?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think it's an easy thing for the administration. If you were trying to raise a lot of money quickly, if they eliminated municipal bonds, it would be about $500 billion over 10 years to the U.S. Treasury. So if you want to, and if you capped it, it's something closer to $200 billion over 10 years. So the impact of the federal treasury is significant. But, NACO's actually done a really good job of defending and putting together a lot of research on why municipal bonds are so important. You wouldn't be doing projects if you didn't have municipal bonds, if you didn't have the tools to build roads, schools, bridges, community facilities. You would do them, they would just cost a lot more to the local taxpayers. In addition, the municipal bonds are, a lot of the concern initially was, well, these are big Wall Street plays, and Wall Street's making a lot of money off of the municipal bonds sector. But if you actually do the research, more than 50% of municipal bonds are owned by retirees, that they're guaranteed income, they're tax exempt, and they're part of their fixed income plan for when they retire. So it just doesn't seem to make much sense for a number of reasons to cap or even eliminate municipal bonds.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It's interesting that in today's market, for small projects, it's cheaper for us to borrow from a bank than it is to sell bonds. Because the bonding process is a rather expensive process. And the interest rates would be actually higher than just to go to a local bank, and borrow.
So any other questions? Anything else you want to wrap up with?
Well, we got a couple of other slides.
Great, okay.
And I'm just going to rush through this real quick just to make sure you all understand the environment that you're going to be walking into next week. The federal budget picture is getting a little bit better. We had $1.5 trillion deficit in 2009. That's down to $486 billion in this last fiscal year. So the deficits are coming down for a variety of reasons. mostly because of sequestration. We've reduced the amount of spending, but also there were some tax increases that were agreed upon at the end of 2013, early 2014, and kind of that was during the fiscal cliff deal. So sequestration, tax increases, and the economic recovery that we've had has brought the deficits lower. However, we're still going to be under sequestration when we come back there, and everyone's going to tell you it's still limiting the amount that the federal government can do in terms of discretionary appropriations, and they can only do so much to bump up programs because there is a cap, and they got to meet those cap levels based on statute. I'll skip this one. I'll just put this slide up real quick because it's extremely confusing, and I did that on purpose. I had my intern put this together. This was 2 years ago for FY14. Everything was all over the map. There's different sequestration levels. There was different budgets, all that exceeded the cap on the defense side for the House and the Senate. Those that were significantly below by the House on the domestic discretionary side. All I'll say about this, it was a mess in 2014. And that's part of the reason why we had a government shutdown in October of 2013. This year, in 2014, last year, we actually had, because of the 2-year budget agreement that Senator Marion and Congressman Ryan agreed to, everyone was on the same page. This is much more soothing graph for me to look at and for Congress to work under. Everyone understood what their caps were. They were all on the same page. So we actually got a pretty good omnibus appropriations bill at the end of the year. And we were hoping that this kind of level of agreement would continue. And after the Republican takeover in November, everyone was talking like they were going to be working together and getting along and making some progress on big issues. And then shortly thereafter, the Obama administration came out with their executive order on immigration and allowing 5 million undocumented citizens to have worker programs and not be deported, from the country. That caused a lot of concern. And in this the basic concern was the president's operating outside of his a constitutional function and basically creating new laws at the executive branch. And just this week, a federal court stayed his executive order and said that the program that was going to be going forward this week is now on hold. I think Republicans in Congress are celebrating that decision, and it's really going to, as of a week ago, so the omnibus appropriations bill that passed in December funded every agency except the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security was funded through the end of next week, so you all are going to be coming back to DC in a very interesting time. They still need to pass the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill for FY15, the year that we're in right now. The Republicans have tried to put in legislation or language not allowing the president's executive order to go through. And there's been concern that Senate Democrats have been stalling the bill and not even allowing the bill to come up for a vote in the Senate. So you were looking at a showdown, and about a week ago, I would have said the Democrats had a leg up because people mostly don't understand the dynamics of the House and the Senate, and they don't understand that even though it's a Republican-controlled Senate, you need 60 votes, which means you need 6 Democrats to come along with you, and the Republicans will be holding the bag, and one of your most important departments, the Department of Homeland Security, could shut down at the end of next week. However, with the court ruling, that kind of says, Republicans, you guys might be right here. The president seems to be going outside of his constitutional limitations in issuing these executive orders. I don't know how this is going to play out. I would think the Republicans kind of have an upper hand and trying to say, hey, we're trying to get this passed in the Senate. Senators won't even vote on this. And we just had a court ruling justifying our position on this. So it'll be really interesting to see if Democrats continue to dig in and say, this is wrong, and we don't agree. We agree with the immigration action that the president took, or whether they'll acquiesce and say, okay, let's pass the bill with these measures in it, but then the president would still veto it. So It's unclear how this is all going to work out. I'm concerned that there's going to be a showdown more today than there would have a week ago because of the court's ruling. I think the Republicans probably would have given in if that court ruling didn't happen. So you all will see that this all play out and unfold next week. Just a quick recap. I'm only going to touch on a couple of these. There was some success last year. Budget agreements. They lift sequestration, or they brought sequestration levels up for a couple of years. Now we're back to regular sequestration in this fiscal year. They did pass some big bills, the water resources bill, a farm bill. They extended the debt ceiling, which they're going to have to do again. And they passed tax extenders, not long-term, but just another year, because they like to just do things 1 year at a time back there. No big thinkers. No progress on transportation reauthorization, immigration, climate change, tax reform, and a long-term budget fix. This calendar, the calendar somewhat dictates some of the things that we're going to be faced with in the current year. Congress came back in early January. The president released his budget in February. Like I mentioned, Homeland Security funding expires at the end of next Friday. We hit another debt ceiling in March, although that timeline's usually extended because government revenues have been better. Federal revenues have been better than predicted. Our transportation deadline hits May 31st. They need to do something on that. Another court decision is going to come down. This one's going to be on Obamacare, where there's been exchanges set up around the country, healthcare exchanges set up around the country in states that the states haven't actually led the initiative. The federal government's been doing it, but these are mostly in states where there's been Republican governors. In the legislation, it's clear that it says that each state should set up an exchange. And there's a number of states that are challenging the federal government, saying it's clear in the legislation that the federal government has no role in setting up these exchanges. And I think there's going to be there's a lot of concern in Washington, D.C. that this is going to overturn these federal exchanges, which would create what many call a death spiral in Obamacare. Once these federal exchanges go down, that causes problems for every other state as well. So Republicans are looking for options to replace Obamacare, although they haven't come out with one to date. I think there's going to be a lot of planning in this possibility that the Supreme Court actually overturns a large portion of Obamacare. The end of the fiscal year is always September 30th. They've been working on Keystone, passed the House and the Senate. It's going to be going to the president next week in terms of approving the Keystone pipeline. The president's likely going to veto that. And there isn't a supermajority to overturn the veto. There's carbon emissions through the EPA that have been offered and are likely to come online here this year, although there's going to be a lot of court battles on that as well. Immigration reform, tax reform, foreign policy, ISIS, Iraq, Syria continues to remain front and center in terms of all of the horrible beheadings and terrorism that you see. It's really spreading throughout the Middle East. And then we always have the presidential elections, which I don't even want to talk about because it's too early, and I'm already tired of hearing about all these people. But the only thing I'd say about it is the presidential campaign season will probably kick in June, and then the attention will be off of Congress. So we really would like to get congressional action on a lot of our priorities in June and July before it gets more politicized than it already is. So we'll be looking forward to a healthy debate at the national level. So sorry, I think we went a little over, but
that's fine. This is really fascinating. You did a great job. And I just have to say a little bit in jest that now we have a new advocacy approach. It's the soothing Joel approach. Right? So you'll just have to bring your charts to when we go on those visits, and so this is what we are striving for.
Yes.
So any other questions?
Well, I would just say thank you for this report, and it looks like you've been both busy and successful, so that's obviously we're getting money, a return for our payments is how I'd say it. And I'm trying to think of this, when they invite me out, it's cherry blossoms and peace and quiet. Go around, I just ask my silly questions, and sometimes somebody cares. But then you go, and it's cold and it's deadlock. I don't know what it means. Just coincidence, I guess. But remember, I'll be here running the ship, and that ought to worry you too. Madam Chair, if I could, then I'd like to make a motion that we do approve our 2015 federal agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the 2015 federal agenda. Any further discussion?
I just want to say thank you for the detailed presentation today, and looking forward to going back and seeing if we can help. So, thanks.
Well, and thank you all very much. You all have been so involved and part of really this broad strategy that we have, and we couldn't do it without you and your great staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and many thanks to Barb, who's helped us coordinate this and get you guys on the phone when we have questions, and we've had some great conversations. So, all right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And that is approved.
Thank you.
We'll see you very soon, if we all make it back there again.
Yeah, it's just cold.
Yeah. Well, it was 4 to 8 inches, though, they said yesterday, so, right. That should be gone by tomorrow. All right, thank you. All right.
Can we talk flood?
Okay, so now we will move down to Public Works. This is considering approval of an order appointing Pete Grell and Joe Fowler to the Solid Waste Management Advisory Council to terms ending January 31st, 2019. We have Jeff Bickford.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Bickford, Environmental Services Division Manager at Public Works. I'm here to talk about our Solid Waste Management Advisory Council and a couple of potential appointments. Just to give a little background on our council, it was actually established back in February of 1989, so it's been around for quite some time. The purpose of the council is to hear and discuss and consider various solid waste related issues, work them over, and ultimately give recommendations to this body of the Board of Commissioners. The council, as it exists currently, is a 16-member council. 8 of those are citizen-at-large positions, and 8 of those positions represent specific industry or area. Currently, the 2 that we're talking about today one is the recycling industry position, and the other is the public health position. The council has a subcommittee. It's called the nomination subcommittee. They recently, it was back on January 27th, that we had 2 applicants, one for each of those 2 I just mentioned represented positions. So first we had Pete Grell from Garten Services, who applied for the recycling industry position, and Joe Fowler, a previous employee of Marion County Health Department, Environmental Health Division, applied for the public health position. So these 2 individuals actually were interviewed by the nomination subcommittee back on January 27th, and the subcommittee reported to the full council that same evening. Actually, at a later meeting of the full advisory council, and then the council made a motion and voted to recommend to the Board of Commissioners that these 2 individuals be potentially seated on the Solid Waste Management Advisory Council. I'm going to let Pete talk about himself here for a minute, but Joe was unable to come today. As I mentioned, Joe Fowler worked for 20 plus years in Marion County's Health Department in the Environmental Health Division. He's been retired for, I believe it's around 8 years now. He has a significant background in the public health field, which I think is going to be a very valuable asset to our council. And this position particularly has been extremely difficult to get a candidate to come in and volunteer for. Generally, folks in that industry are extremely busy, and they don't want to add a lot to their plate. As far as the recycling industry position, all of you are familiar with John Matthews, who served in that position from when we initially started this council back in 1989 until about a year and a half ago, when he retired from his position and from the council. Pete here also works for Garden, and he, again, has found to be an able candidate, but I'm going to let Pete tell us a little bit about himself.
Well, I don't speak well about myself, meaning that I'm not used to this. I've been with Garten for 18 years, moved up through this system, the management and the industry, learning a lot from not only John, but Sandy Matthews as well. I am pleased and honored to be considered for this position, and I'm hoping that I can meet some of the standards that John Matthews set. He's, I don't know, well known throughout Oregon, throughout the Northwest.
Well, thank you. And it says on your application you're a master recycler. How long have you been doing that, and how'd you get involved in that?
I think it is 2004. I went through with Bonnie Sullivan same year. I heard about it originally from John. He convinced me that it was a good thing to do, and I took it. It was awesome. It's a great program. I wish more people would take it, not just industry people, but lay people in particular.
Very good. You have questions? for
Thank you,
Pete?
Commissioner Pete. Thank you very much for stepping forward. I know I saw you at the SWAMAC meeting, sitting out there and paying attention to what was going on. And thank you for your service, and personally taking the master recycling class right now, and just got to tour the Garten facility. I think it was a week ago Saturday. We went through there, and
Right.
quite impressed with the new investment and equipment and what was going on there. And so thank you. And as far as Mr. Fowler, I was next to him on the treadmill on Monday, and I thanked him while we were both jogging for serving, and looking forward. He's my neighbor, so if we need him to show up, I'll pick him up and bring him to the
Yeah, you just
SWAMAC
kind of yank
meeting.
him over.
Right. So,
That's good.
yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Pete.
I don't have a whole lot to add, just a long relationship with John, and I know he was on SWAMAC and really one of the pioneers of recycling here in Marion County in Oregon. So if that's your predecessor and your mentor, you're probably on a pretty good shape.
And I'll just add my thanks for you being willing to step forward in your service. It's really critical that we have that connection with Garten on the Solid Waste Management Advisory Council, and you're bringing all of these years of experience and the expertise that you have and the relationships that you have. I know you'll be a great addition to the group, so thank you for doing that.
So, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we consider approval of an order appointing Pete Grell and Joe Fowler to the Solid Waste Management Advisory Council to terms ending January 31st, 2019.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the order for these two appointments. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 They are approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. Last action item, and then we will move to one public hearing that we have today, and that item is to receive and consider appeal of a hearings officer's decision for conditional use. This is case number CU 14-022, Marion Ag Services, Inc., clerk's file number 5692, and Joe Fenimore is here to give us the summary of what's going on. So, Joe, welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, this is Joe Fenimore. This item before you today is an appeal of a hearings officer's decision approving a conditional use to establish a fertilizer blending, storage, and packaging facility as a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use on a 101-acre parcel located in a 9,300 block of St. Paul Highway. The proposed facility, which is currently located in the city of St. Paul, will be relocated to the subject property. They'll bring in fertilizers on train cars, custom blend those for farmers, and ship them out to the farms on trucks. The criteria for this case are found in the Marion County Code at 17-136-060A and D, and they're listed on pages 7 and 16 of the hearings officer's decision. Initially, the planning director issued a decision approving the request. It was appealed to the hearings officer, who, after holding a public hearing, determined that the applicant's proposal meets the applicable standards and criteria and approved the request subject to conditions. That decision resulted in this appeal. The appellant raises 6 issues in the appeal. The first is noise generated by the train. The appellant provided federal regulations regarding train noise and some data collected from a decibel meter of the existing train operation, and concludes that the additional train traffic will significantly impact neighboring properties in a negative way. The hearings officer discussed all potential noise impacts, including rail noise, in finding 15 on page 12. She states that noise is a legitimate concern for Cincinnati residential uses, that information in the record regarding sound is good general information that shows sound associated with the use can be mitigated by barriers, distance, equipment, location, and design. As a result, condition of approval number 8 was added requiring the applicant provide an engineered certified plan showing that the plant will operate within a noise standard found in Oregon administrative rules for new industrial uses on, or a new industrial noise source on previously unused site. Item 2, the appellant claims that the property in question is part of an ongoing investigation by DEQ. The hearings officer discusses this issue in finding 14, beginning on page 10. She concludes that although the Marion Ag Plant on an abutting property to the south in an industrial zone has been subject to DEQ enforcement, there are currently no violations on the property this is proposed on. And there's not a way to not issue a permit because it's not the same property. Item 3, the applicant talks about that there's a natural watershed, Ryan Creek, that traverses the property. The creek is discussed by Public Works comments in finding 6F, as well as by the hearings officer in finding 14 on page 12. Condition of approval number 4 requires compliance with all Public Works drainage requirements. In item 4, the appellant states there is very little data regarding the kinds of chemicals used, blended, trucked, and stored at the facility. There's no specific list of equipment or plans on how dust exhaustion or chemical capture will occur. The hearings officer, in her decision, added condition number 7 that requires continual compliance with all DEQ air and water quality discharge standards. Finally, the last 2 items, the appellant states that there's not enough detailed information on the location of the railroad spur and also how the proposed new facility is going to be kept separate from the existing facility on the industrial land to the south. Regarding these items, this request is to establish a new facility separate from the existing facility to the south. The 2 facilities cannot be combined under this request. That would require a separate land use application. If the request is ultimately approved, the applicant will be required by condition number 9 to submit a detailed development site plan that significantly conforms to the conceptual site plan submitted with the application. The access for the existing plant in the industrial zone is onto Butteville Road for trucks. This plant would be accessible to St. Paul Highway to the north. They're in a similar position, but there's a separate distance between them. They're not to be used together. The board has the following options. 1, accept the appeal and remand the case back to the hearings officer, requiring an agreement from the applicant to extend the 150-day decision-making deadline. 2, accept the appeal and schedule a public hearing, and a suggested hearing date is March 4th, 2015. 3, deny the appeal and uphold the hearings officer's decision approving the application. The 150-day deadline, final decision deadline in this case was March 2nd, 2015. The applicant has granted a 2-day extension to the deadline, which is now March 4th. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Well, I'll start without a question. First of all, it's kind of, in my experience, a little bit of a strange case, and normally when we have an appeal, it's by the applicant, so this is by a neighbor. So one question would be, I never see an address, and how close is that neighbor, or where, do you know that?
I believe it's abutting property across the railroad tracks and across Butteville
And
Road.
across Butteville Road.
Yes.
I read all through it pretty seriously. Couple of points. First of all, it seems like an appropriate place. If it's not going to be in St. Paul, this is still a location where it can service the St. Paul French Prairie area with the products. And this is fertilizer. That company, in my mind, specializes in lime application. But it seems an appropriate, to me, location. It does have some new impact on us. Trucks going out Butteville Road where we've already had trouble. This is a little off the subject, but I'm just, as I've been thinking about through the whole thing. But most of the product comes in by train. And that's kind of interesting because it just happens to be located at about equidistance from a similar operation where fertilizer products are unloaded by the former Woodburn fertilizer at West Woodburn. And then, of course, the same activities in Donald to the north. So, again, in operations that have been going on in the area, and I've never heard of any problems with any of them. The fact that it has a train available, that makes sense. Then there was a list of concerns brought up by I've got a name here, James Haberstich. And it seemed like in the write-up, and in taking it back to the hearings officer, or the hearing, I should say, all those were addressed, and I believe they were addressed adequately. So I really come to the conclusion that this ought to be approved, and I'm going to go ahead and make it a motion that we deny the appeal, uphold the hearings officer, and approve the application.
You ready to second that motion, Commissioner?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
All right, so let's have a little bit more discussion.
Sure.
All right, so do you have any questions or comments, Commissioner?
Just that I read through it, and I think that there's been a thorough hearing in the concerns, and I think staff just reiterated those in the hearings officer's findings on those issues. And obviously, this is an ag-related business, and we need to make sure we can keep our agricultural industry moving in Marion County. So.
All right, thank you. And I read through it thoroughly last night as well and came to the same conclusion. And I just think it's, number one is, I almost always, in situations where appeals are being asked for the last 12 years, have said, let's have people come and they can have their day in court. If there's something new or an area where we can interpret, where the hearings officer couldn't. But in this particular instance, this was an applicant that was asked through Oregon's land use laws to demonstrate whether or not they could meet the relevant criteria, and went through, and these are not easy criteria to meet. And we have a hearings officer who is very expert, I mean, outstandingly expert, I don't even know, superlative, in terms of her understanding of land use laws and how it fits with the county ordinances and what the standards are and what has to be done. And she went through, and in every single instance, the criteria, whether it's satisfied or could be satisfied with conditions. And then there's a page and a half of conditions at the end that address some of the concerns that the opponents of this have put forward. But if I think to myself, because this is exclusive farm use property, correct?
Correct.
And we cannot regulate beyond what the law says on what happens on farm use. So even if this didn't happen, trucks could come there, trains could come, and they could just load crops on there, right? I mean, and the noise would still be there, and because this is why we have zoning in Oregon, so these activities can happen. So if it weren't a fertilizer plant, and if it were something else on that property that they didn't have to do a commercial use in conjunction with farm use, the activity and the noise and the things that the concerns that are being raised could still happen appropriately, legally on this property. So I just want to make sure that I'm is this correct, Joe?
That is correct, yes.
Right. So I can't see any reason in this instance to put the applicant through the time, the expense, and so on to come here to have these same issues brought up, and really legally, it's all okay. And so then the other question I would just ask Joe to make sure that we've kind of dotted all the I's are, so say that the opponent, then can they appeal this beyond us to the courts or to LUBA? Where would this go? It
would be an appeal to LUBA.
To LUBA.
Yes.
Do you believe that Marion County's review of this, the thoroughness of the hearings officer's report, would be upheld in LUBA? I mean, do you think we've got everything under control, covered, or whatever the word is?
I believe it's all covered, but I'm not an attorney, so I...
Right, exactly. But I mean, very defensible
Very,
in
very
terms
thorough,
of,
too.
right, in terms of all of the review of all of the relevant land use statutes, criteria, rules, laws, whatever. Okay, so that's my view. So any further discussion?
I just would have added one, and I don't mean to make light of, even if it's only one person applying, understand the impacts it could have on them, but then I go right back to the things you're saying. This is appropriate, illegal, and I couldn't justify holding it up.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like we have a motion and a second, and we'll take a vote. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 All right, that is passed. So
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So now we have one public hearing, which is under the Contract Review Board. And that is a public hearing to consider an order granting an exemption to allow the use of a request for proposal as an alternative competitive process for a public improvement contract for the health services renovation project of the health services building. And we have Camber Schlag and Larry Tilford here. Good morning. It is still morning, yes. It's been a
Good
while.
morning, commissioners and members of the board. My name is Camber Schlag. I am the Contracts and Procurement Manager here at Marion County, located in the Finance Department.
And I'm Larry Tilford, Facilities Program Manager.
And we are here today requesting an exemption from the procurement process from doing a public improvement contract. Instead of doing an invitation to bid, we would like to request permission to do an RFP. The Marion County Business Services Department Facilities Management Program, which I will refer to as the county, has been authorized by the Board of Commissioners to proceed with the HVAC, window, lighting, renovation, and tenant improvements for the Health Services Building, which I will call the Health Services Renovation Project. The county has a contract with Solarc Engineering and Energy Plus Architectural Consulting for the architectural and engineering services for this project. The Health Services Building was built in 1974 and is approximately 44,516 square feet. The county's public contracting rules require the use of the traditional invitation to bid on a public improvement contract. Marion County Public Contracting Rules, Section 40-06102, identifies a request for proposal, or an RFP, as an alternative contracting method. The county has identified the RFP solicitation method as the best option because of the critical nature of the work, which requires a greater emphasis on the general contractor's experience and technical ability. In order to utilize a competitive RFP for public improvements, ORS 279C.335 requires that the local contract review board makes certain findings as part of the authorization the use of the alternative contracting method. The findings for the use of the RFP for a public improvement must demonstrate that it is unlikely that the exemption will encourage favoritism or substantially diminish competition for public improvement contracts. The awarding of public improvement contracts under this exemption will likely result in substantial cost savings and other substantial benefits to the county and to the public. The RFP will be publicly advertised to ensure a fair, open, and competitive process. The RFP process allows the county to select the firm best suited for the project based on factors such as experience, ability to respond to the technical complexity, the unique character of the project, past performance, price, and other factors. So to highlight some of these other factors, I'd like to point out that the use of the RFP methodology allows the county and the firm the ability to collaborate with the logistical details of moving building staff and operations with the necessary technical expertise that comes from equivalent projects. The Health Services Building functions as a healthcare facility. A logistical approach must be taken with this project because occupants and operations will be moved from areas under construction and returned upon completion. As a result, there will be a strict timeline, and it will be essential to maintain the safety and functionality during this renovation project. Also, the Health Services Building houses staff of approximately 168 who serve on an average 400 people per day. The staff and the public may continue to occupy certain areas of the building during this renovation. Staff and their operations will be moved in scheduled strategic phases within the building away from the direct construction activities. So based on the foregoing, the findings outlined above justify that the proposed exemption and use of an alternative contracting method would benefit the public by providing a construction methodology that results in the most likely opportunity to acquire a specialized, technical, peer-reviewed, and cost-effective solution for the health services renovation project. Do you have any questions today?
So I just want to back up to give a little bit of context. So Marion County put in a, what's the CIP stand for?
Capital improvement
Capital
project?
improvement project, thank you, I'm getting really bad here. For just having the windows replaced at the health building. And that was done through a company that we did a bid with, is that right? Or did we do an RFP for that one? I'm trying to, and so then, is this the additional renovation work that is with this, or is this for the windows and the renovation? So explain what we are working on here.
The windows that were replaced, I think that you may be thinking about, Commissioner, were at the juvenile admin building. That was completed, and that was changing out single pane
No,
windows.
no, this was the group that came with the health department and was,
That was Solarc.
right.
And
right.
that group ostensibly initially came to focus on the HVAC replacement of the building, because that equipment is,
Can you pull the microphone closer to you, too, please?
I'm sorry, that equipment was original to the building in 1974, and it's all well beyond its usable life. In fact, we have the major air handler on the building had a major mechanical failure this last week. So we're trying to be proactive and address the deteriorating HVAC system and replace those components that have failed or are failing. And that's what triggered the project in the first place. And then one of the additional elements that was considered was the window replacement, because if we simply replace the HVAC system and don't deal with the single pane windows, we aren't really recovering the energy that we want to do.
Okay, so, but I'm still confused on process-wise. We had a company, Solarc, right?
Mhm.
How did they get selected? And then how does this RFP relate to what they're doing now and what happens in the future?
They were selected through the RFP process.
So there was an RFP to select them.
That's right.
And they had a scope of work that was to do the windows,
Yes.
right? And so
The
now.
HVAC system.
And the HVAC, okay,
Yes.
the windows and the HVAC.
Yes.
But then we got into we're going to change the lobby and we're going to move OSU Extension out and put a kitchen in here and do this and that. So
Right.
that's what this is about, is that right? Or is this about,
So this is the total project. I believe what ended up happening, and if I remember correctly, is that once it was decided that the HVAC would be replaced, the windows would need to be replaced to enhance that energy consumption. The other option would be, because of the HVAC being replaced, the ceiling would be taken down.
right?
That's when it was decided that the lighting would be included
Right.
into this project. And then from there, I believe it was also further decided that the health department had funds that would assist in the TIs. And
In
it
the
would
what?
just be tenant improvements,
Tenant
which we call
improvements,
TIs.
thank
So this would be one large project.
Right. So it grew
and-
from being a fairly limited project to a larger project.
Correct.
Which is why we're going out for an RFP again, because we haven't actually bid competitively on the remainder of the project.
Correct.
Okay. So, and then what we want to do here is, rather than going with low bid, we want to do a request for proposals for this, the same that we did for the original project that was more limited in scope. Is that right?
The original RFP was to select the engineering consultant that would do the design work, but
Alright.
not to be general contractor on the project.
Okay, I see. So the design work has been done, and now we're going out for the.
Exactly.
Correct.
All right.
That's right.
For the whole thing?
Yes.
Windows and everything?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now I understand it, thank you.
And it did grow, and I hope it doesn't grow anymore, but it certainly, we know that it needs some improvements out there.
All right. So any other questions, or no one else was
Just
confused?
a
I
little
was
one
the
to
only
form. Should there have been an action item included in this? And
Madam Chair, Commissioners, this is an action as the Contract Review Board, so you could just close the public hearing, and the order is listed in the agenda item.
Great.
So,
I was just curious.
So we'd have a motion to close the public hearing and then approve the order, is that correct? That would allow us to do this alternative solicitation process.
Is it me?
It is.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we close the public hearing and that we consider approval of an order granting an exemption to allow the use of request for proposal as an alternative competitive process for a public improvement contract for the health services renovation project of the health services building.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing, and then we're going to approve the order that allows us to grant the exemption from using the low bid process and to use an alternative solicitation process, which would be a request for proposals. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 It's approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right, so that concludes our business for today. I don't know why I'm taking my glasses off because I'm going to have to read. All right, so I will now read our Board of Commissioners Wednesday to Wednesday calendar. These are meetings where a quorum or 2 or 3 commissioners will be present. We are just completing our Wednesday board session. Today is still Wednesday, February 18th, and we're in the Senator Hearing Room at Courthouse Square. This afternoon at 3 o'clock, there will be a meeting at the Oregon State Capitol, I believe with governor's staff of 2 commissioners for the Santiam Canyon Economic Development.
That got canceled.
Oh, that did? So
We'll
you're
still
not,
have a
Yeah.
prep sometime this afternoon.
Right.
But
All right.
that actual meeting
Yeah.
with all the turmoil there has been canceled.
oh, okay, so we'll see, but are you meeting together in this meeting?
I don't know. I just see, at least on my calendar, for prep
Uh,
session.
I will be going to French Prairie instead
Okay.
of this. I talked to Barb about it, but
Okay.
Commissioner Brentano and Barb are going to be in the update.
Got it. So that doesn't need to be on the notice calendar because it's just one commissioner and staff.
Well, a special one, you could kind of,
Yeah, and we need to
Right.
notice
We'll
it.
put you on the calendar,
Yeah.
Sam.
Really big deal.
All right. And then at 4:30 this afternoon is a public safety briefing with Marion County civic leaders. And so that is the Public Safety Coordinating Council, the Marion County Reentry Council will be meeting in room 350 at the state capitol with our Marion County legislative delegation. And we actually have quite a few of them coming.
Good.
And we will go through our public safety issues with them and have kind of a give and take with them about what's going on with public safety in Marion County and how they can help us. And then starting tomorrow, Thursday, although I believe we're taking off at different times and places, it's the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. And so that really will take place from Thursday through next Wednesday, February 25th. And because of 2 commissioners being at that conference, and as you heard with our federal agenda being in D.C. and meeting with our delegation, we will not have a regular Wednesday board session next week. And that is the calendar. So anything else for the good of the order?
Well, Madam Chair, I think Commissioner Brentano wants to meet anyways. Didn't you say you wanted to meet and get some work done without us here?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, I see. So you're going to have a board, you're just not going to take any votes.
And you don't have to.
I might vote and see how it goes.
You don't-
You're the-
yeah.
We'll call him the Marion County czar.
And you don't have to publish that meeting because there's not 2 of us there.
Right,
So.
exactly. You can just have, then the secret meeting thing will come out again.
You
That's
should
not
know
good.
any decision reached would be unique, so that should impress you.
All right, well,
It's good to have you back, and
Yeah, thank you.
I miss sitting in the chair. I'm getting warmed up and had to get out of it again. So.
well, I may go on vacation in the summer and you can have the
Good,
chair back for
good.
a week or 2.
I'll practice again.
All right.
Did you learn anything about, I can say now, we don't usually like to announce someone's being gone, but did you learn anything in Hawaii? I watched little things. When I was there last, they were putting in garbage plants. That was interesting, and there was some scandal with the local politicians
Burners?
there.
They were putting in burners?
Yeah, I forget how it goes, but I think it's more on Oahu.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that's a big issue there.
Well, the resort where we stay is on the west side of Oahu, the southwest corner, which has been developed, but in past years, it was one of the last to be developed, and so the garbage dump is just up a ways from there. And a couple of years ago when we went, it had been flooding there, and it actually overflowed the dump and pulled the garbage down the beach.
Sloughed it
And
down.
so people could not go into the water down on the beach because there were needles and garbage and things like that in the water, and they were cleaning it up. I remember checking the internet every day to find out what the status was of the flooding and the mess that they had there. So if you think about, Oahu is, a lot of people live there, and it's a little island, and using landfill for the garbage, it's an
Does
island.
have to go somewhere.
Right, you can't
I
truck
would
it
think-
across the nation like we do, so.
Burning it to make energy like we do here would be a really good way to go there.
Oh, yeah, it'd make a whole lot of sense for them. So, yeah, no, I checked out restaurants. Kind of in your bailiwick, Commissioner. There are a lot of good ones there, except they charge an awful lot, but
You did inspections, is that how you'd say it?
Well, we evaluated the food and we evaluated the service, and we found it very, very nice.
I shouldn't tell this story, but you reminded me. I can even remember the name. On our honeymoon, we went to Hawaii, and we went to this, it was a 5-star rated Tammy had seen in some restaurant, and it was like Bagwell's 2121. So we got reservations and went. I'm telling you, it was fantastic. But I don't know how to wrap this up. I ate so much I got sick, and I'm not making that up. And you know me well enough to know that's a lot.
Oh, wow.
Really? Really?
Very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think we could probably end on that.
Okay.
So with
I'm
that,
hungry.
we'll adjourn for a couple weeks.